First, thanks to Wolf, Herbie. I mean, it's been a great day, and yesterday we had a workshop before. It's been really a good show, and a lot of interesting people. I haven't been back to Munich in a long time, so it's actually nice to get back. What we're going to talk about really is, I do this sort of series on good tech, bad tech, because technology normally is weaponized first, then it's commercialized, and then it becomes democratized. And that's pretty well the same for all technology. Everything in your phone, in your iPhone anyways, the research was done by military funding. So most of that stuff comes through. But a lot of this technology is very good, and there's a lot of positive upside. So I'm Canadian. I did basically have a strong finance background, corporate finance. I lived in Europe for 20 years. I worked in Munich for 6, 7 years. During the dotcom, I had 3 startups, 2 were acquired. The money ended up in Switzerland. I ended up in Switzerland. I annoyed my friends for about 3 years, and they said, get a job, Galipeau. And I had done research. I've had one leg in deep tech research probably since the mid-90s. Quite deep, actually, in the last 10, 15 years. Through a lab at MIT. It's part of their forbidden research group. You can Google it. You won't find anything because it's forbidden. But it really looks at non-commercialized tech. So it looks at technology that will not be commercialized for about 3 to 4 to 5, 6, 7 years. So it's very advanced looking at pipeline coming down technology. And what I do with them is a lot of their social impact. So I look at what is the societal impacts of this technology. We've looked at things like cloning and all these new technologies. So what I'm going to run through here is 10, 11 slides, just going to cut through. But really what we're going to look at, I mean, this is sort of how we're structured right now. I just left the UN 2 weeks ago. And which is an interesting, I mean, the UN's a fantastic place. The development sector is a really interesting world. And the development sector is now being privatized, just like most government agencies are being privatized. And this is something we're putting together called SDGx, X being platform and exponential. We've got a near future lab. What's interesting, and this is not so much what it is, it's the partnerships that we're developing. So the near future lab is we've agreed with a partnership with Mohammed Yunus, the Nobel Prize winner, the founder of the Grameen Bank. And he coined this term called pro-poor technology. And he was associating with FinTech 15, 20 years ago and small crop agriculture. But there's no reason why artificial intelligence, genomics, robotics, automation cannot be pro-poor technologies. There's no reason at all. And there's a lot of upside to that, especially in health and education and some of the other sectors. And then obviously we're partnering with Singularity University. We're bringing them to Asia, potentially into China. So we're going to bring their accelerator. Well, the thing that I did find in the last 10, 15 years, disciplined accelerators are pretty tough to come by. Incubators, accelerators on every corner is creating a bit of a welfare system. There's too much government money going in, too much free money. So really the Y Combinator Singularity style of really disciplined acceleration. And obviously with ventures and accelerate the consulting and the way that we want, we're going to raise a fund too. But it's not really about that story. It's not really about me. It's really about the journey. Started in Canada, end up in Europe, I've jumped across multiple sectors. So in essence, I'm an accidental hybrid. And this becomes very important. Who would consider themselves a hybrid here? Right, because we're very much moving into a hybrid economy. There used to be a civic sector, a public sector, and a private sector. We're pretty well defined. But now it's all gray. You've got government privatizing everything. You got civic who are actually moving into private sector. You got private sector who's starting to own development in the SDGs. So we're very much moving into a hybrid economy. And people who are hybrids, who have jumped across sectors, learned a lot of skills and experiences, made a lot of failures along the way, can sort of understand this world that we're moving into. And 20 years ago, there was the dot-com internet. There was a world without internet. There was 5 years of magic. Then there was a world with internet. But 20 years later, governments are still struggling to figure out the internet. Policy regulation, things as data protection, everything else. We're moving into a near future where you're going to have 6 or 7 technologies all hitting at the same time. So regulation is out the window. There's no way the governments are going to try and regulate a new type of, gene line genomic modifications. I mean, there's no way that governments can wrap their head around this kind of stuff. So we have some really big issues coming up, and this is just part of it. I'm dyslexic, so I can't read off my screen, so you'll have to read the screen. But the German government defined this sort of economic miracle, the Industrial Revolution, a long time ago. The German government actually defined this, Industrial Revolution 4.0. The World Economic Forum now is talking about this new economic policy situation. They call it Governance 4.0. You've got Carlotta Perez, who really comes up with this understanding of where development is, these new sort of behavioral economists. Piketty, Stiglitz, these types of economists, sort of redefining development 4.0. But what's missing in all this is this concept of citizen 4.0. Where does citizen fit into all this? Because citizen is very well forgotten about this. And this is part of the problem. Everybody knows what these are? Who doesn't know what those are? Good, good. These are the SDGs, simply a framework, 17 goals. The UN put it together, ratified by 193 governments. And now we're going through this achievement phase. The magic number is 2030. So 15 years, all these goals should be achieved by 2030. The problem is we're moving into this very hyper-rapid acceleration of technology, as well as this sort of hybrid economy that we're moving into. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through some of the technologies, some of the situations that are coming up. A lot of this is very much based in evidence. My world is very much based in research evidence. I've got a practical leg, but I've got a very deep research leg. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything, so I'm not the economist. I'm not doing any of these types of things. These are some of the realities that's coming down the pipeline. So when we start to look at population, 30% of the global population in only 3 countries. This is true. 70% of the largest urban centers are going to be in Asia. So Europe, North America, South America, there's some shifting of where your large consumer groups, where your middle class is going to be situated in the world. Population of 26 countries nearly all in Africa will grow by 50%. Nigeria's population will double by 2040. The 3 largest countries in the world, India, China, you know the third one? Nigeria. 3rd largest population in the world. Better healthcare, innovation, early marriages, high birth rates, lack of family planning access. These are some of the things. So it doesn't matter if you're a policymaker, if you're an investor, a startup entrepreneur, a tech researcher, this is going to give you, the next 10 slides or so, some indication of where there's opportunity. Where there's opportunity to make some money, no one's against that, but where there's opportunity to create some positive impact, or at least minimize negative impact. When you start to look at regulation, it becomes really interesting. The first person to live until 150 years old is already born. I do a bit of a lecture called 2100, because if everything works out well, I may get to 2050, 2060, but certainly my daughters will get to 2100. So the decisions, if you're a policymaker, the decisions, if you're actually investing in impact, the decisions that you make today have a much longer impact. Your children are going to be hit or benefit from the decisions that you are making as an investor and as a policymaker. This becomes a lot different. The generations are getting very much longer. They're not turning around so quickly. 65-year-old population will double by 2030, 2 times the amount in the developed and less developed. So the aging population is coming to you, not to the least developed countries. They're going to have youth bubbles. That's where all the entrepreneurship is going to be. That's where a majority of the consumer habits are going to be formed in the future. It's probably the area where there's going to be much less regulation than Europe and North America. So that means tech adoption is going to happen a lot quicker in Asia and in Latin America and in Africa than it will in Europe. There will be a new digital divide, and you'll be on the bottom end of that. When it comes to regulation, you've all heard about the babies that were genetically modified, the twins in China. That's them, actually. Cute. There's more in the pipeline, as they say. There's more genetic modification coming down this pipeline. And it gets really interesting when you start to look at this new type of genetic modification, sort of gene ostracan genetic modification. So what they're doing now is they're not looking at proteins and abstracts, they're looking at cortexes. So you have larger cerebral cortexes, which means you have a larger cognitive capacity, which means you're smarter. So the digital divide, if you've got internet and I don't, you're banked and I'm not, is going to change drastically. That if I have the money, I can see better than you, I can hear better than you, I'll be stronger than you, I'll be taller than you, I'll be healthier than you, I'll live longer than you. I'll be smarter than you. So these where these new divides are going to start shifting. The digital divide is not digital anymore. It's moving very much into a biological divide. Industrial Revolution 4.0, automation obviously will leapfrog mechanization. New job creation will simply cannot keep up with job losses. Seriously? I gotta move fast. There's a lot of sugarcoating going on right now. They had this with the internet. It's the same sort of thing, that job losses are going to be massive, but the job creation is going to be there. We'll create new jobs. With the internet technology, it took about 8 years latency between job loss and job creation. There's a lot of disruption in the middle of the financial crisis. Now going into this new, there's not going to be job creation. When you talk about robotics and automation going into the garment industry, there's not going to be any job creation. Very, very little job creation is coming out of this type of stuff. And that's not only service and manufacturing, it's going into the professionals, manufacturing, and the service jobs as well. 60% of current job descriptions are eliminated. You've heard that before. I feel very sorry for anyone who's doing a finance degree right now or an accounting degree. You won't have a job in the future. Prediction by 2040, 65% of the world's working population will be informal. Most of Asia's economies are informal. That means they don't pay taxes, they pay maybe a police at the corner, a bit of a bribe, and they run their businesses. That's going to start happening. The gig economy is going to become informal economy. The top line basically says that the world is literally choking in pollution. It's not only plastics, it's clothing, it's material, it's all sorts of excess materials from infrastructure and everything else. So a lot of the stuff is going to be eliminated, but material sciences are going to come to the rescue. There's a lot of work in material sciences. It's probably the most undervalued investment area right now is material sciences. This is an area you may want to look at. But obviously when you're looking at that, ocean and space-based economies will be larger than land-based economies by 2045. There's going to be a huge shift. There's going to be submersible manufacturing, so basically underwater manufacturing. Very expensive to send humans underwater, very cheap to send robotics underwater. So there's going to be a shift to manufacturing underwater. You're going to see a lot of these, middle gravity, low gravity, no gravity manufacturing. The startups are actually starting right now. They're doing experimentation in this area. Vertical fisheries, you're going to see a lot of these types of things happening as well. Urban design is shifting as a result of climate change. That goes into material as well as some of the technologies. Densification, citizen spaces are going polycentric. You're going to live, work, shop all in the same buildings. That's the way the urban designs are starting to go down this thing. The last line is extremely important in the sense, if your city cannot attract talent, your city is dead. The hunt for talent is on. And this is a big challenge when you talk about smart cities and all this urban and green design and everything else. If you cannot, look at Dubai, can't attract the talent in. They're paying to get talent in Dubai. One of the major mistakes in smart cities. You've got a brain drain moving out of Singapore. You got Korea, another brain drain. Talent is leaving Korea very quickly. You've got shifting around between Europe and North America, a lot moving to Toronto, my city. There's a lot of talent moving up to Toronto. So this has become, so human capital now becomes part of this equation. You really have to understand where human capital, as a policymaker, as an investor, as an entrepreneur. Talent. Smart investors don't invest in ideas, they invest in talent. They need ideas or a dime a dozen. You need the talent to pull it off. And that's where the big challenge is going to be in the future. Obviously, you go into solar efficiencies and everything else. We're at that tipping point right now. There's no doubt about it. The cost of alternative energy, if you take the subsidies away from dirty energy, the cost of alternative energy is actually cheaper now. And there's a shift going in. Renewables are expected to become the cheapest form of power generation by 2020. That's happening pretty fast. Carbon sequestering, things like carbon farming, a very interesting technology around carbon farming. So there's a lot of ways to look at different ways of doing that area. Everybody knows about this. That line up top is probably very true. Cryptocurrencies, FinTech, blockchain, most important invention in the last 500 years. I didn't say that, someone else did, but it's probably true. Blockchain, anyone who's investing in blockchain now should get their money out really quickly because there's new versions coming out. And the new versions of blockchain are going to actually be a lot different than the current version of blockchain. That doesn't mean cryptocurrencies, but blockchains are moving away from data into decision modeling and behavior libraries. So there's a lot of shifting around in the packets that are involved. So we look at verification. We look at some of the technology around neural mapping that is using a new type of blockchain to verify signals on decision modeling. So when you get handicapped people in a wheelchair can drive, or gamers, and even now you can actually trade thoughts back and forth. But you need verification for these types of things. Satellite networks, I won't go into too much detail, but obviously when you go into quantum, I was at the quantum session this morning. It's a really good session. Quantum is a game changer, and it's happening. There's 3 open quantum machines right now. Most of the pilot work on quantums right now is done by quantum gamers. Gamers are the biggest coders on quantum computers right now. They're great quantum games. And if you understand the properties of quantum, that gets really bizarre when you can be here and there at the same time. So there's a lot of different things happening in that. And then you get this sort of reaction reverse, outright ban in China, warnings in the UK, the US. But at the same time, you got the IMF and the World Bank promoting to national governments to start thinking about creating digital currencies. So there's a huge shift coming up, and obviously Facebook coming up with Libra. Who knows about Colibra? Yeah, Libra's nothing. Read about Colibra, because that's going to be the machine behind Libra. So Colibra, when you start to understand that, then it sort of changes the game in a lot of ways. Teaching to the test has failed a generation. This is the biggest problem. If I had all the money that the UN had, I'd put the whole thing into education reform. It really is a failure. Your governments, my governments, most of the developing nation governments, it really is a failure. You're basically educating mid-level robots that are going to come out. And this is really going to be a problem in the future. Social economy is thriving, but social investment is extremely small when you do the comparative. So without full education reform, without the development of that type of talent, especially around social entrepreneurship, social business models, social financing models, there are going to be some struggles around how are we going to get back to the social economy. It all goes hand in hand. So these are some of the things one would consider. Transhumanism, body-computer implants, cyborgs, that's also a reality. You guys probably know Neil. What he does, he's got that hooked into a cerebral cortex, and he sends out radio signals that cures his color blindness. That's what this does, because colors vibrate at different frequencies. So he sends out sound signals. I think it cuts into them. He's been wearing this for a couple of years, and you've seen biohacking go and happen. Biohacking is becoming very real. And it's going to start, and it's going to be unregulated to a large extent. So these things are actually happening right now. You know, these optogenics, what I was talking about earlier on, XR, the sort of that taking VR and AR to that next level with full body haptics, full body immersion. They're going to redefine this digital divide, but what they're going to redefine is space and time. And that becomes really interesting when you look at space and time, because these have always been static. We were in a building, the space is static, it doesn't move, I'm here right now. But in the future, that can change, where I can be in any room, and I can be at any room at any time. So I can actually now go to Harvard classes. I can go to any of these. I can have the luxury of having the best teachers in the world, the best psychologists in the world, and potentially even work for the best companies in the world. I don't have to be there. That will happen. Autonomous cars, you see this right now, where the car is going to be driverless. Well, that car is simply a space. It can be a doctor's office. It can be a cinema. It can be a classroom. It can be an office, a work office. These spaces now are being redefined. I had some great conversation with Christo, the architect. But it's all being redefined when you look at how these things come together. I think it's one of the last slides, but augmented cognition become the new reality. So you would talk about the human operating system. You can Google it. Don't go to Google. Go to Google Scholar. Just a little trick. Anything you want to Google, go to Google Scholar first and Google it. And you'll get some really, a lot more interesting information than you will from Google. But the human operating system, they're very close to developing these operating systems. And it sounds a bit like sci-fi, but when you look at, for example, you know those Boston Dynamic doggy robots? Those videos were coming out the last year. Those videos are 9 years old. So you can imagine what little doggy robot does now. So most of the stuff that you read in the public papers are probably 5 to 6 to 7 years old before it comes, because there's just too much IP in this, and they don't publish. So when they were getting ready to commercialize, that's when they start to bring a lot of this information out. But a lot of the stuff has been developed a long time ago. Behavioral libraries. These are really actually interesting when you look at, data is interesting, but they're moving much further away to decision modeling, prescriptive algorithms, and behavioral libraries. Who played in that, what is it, the Facebook 10-year challenge? You guys get that here? Yeah, you sort of had a picture of you now and a picture of you 10 years ago. Big thing. A lot of people around the world. And it sounds funny, very, very, very cutesy. But what Facebook was doing was training algorithms to age people, to understand how you age, so they can start to work that into and sell that. And these becomes behaviors. We're talking about skills development, and these types of things. In essence, it's behavioral development. Skill is simply behavior. And these behavioral libraries, there's thousands of these libraries where you can actually download behavior. So if you own a gaming company, for example, if you own any of these large advertising companies, these corporates, you can actually download behaviors, your behavior. You can actually download these behavior patterns and plug them into what they're going to sell on advertising and what they're going to shape you in the future. So it goes very closely to what Mark was talking about. Social engineering has been happening for a long time. And most people are socially engineered. You're told what to wear. You're told how to act. You're told who to like and who not to like. That's just part of the normal human system. Artists normally break away from that, or people who are a little bit eclectic can break away from that because they don't buy into it. But if you're into this influential model or these other things, you very much buy into it. Augmented AI is really interesting. Another thing too, you should Google that. It's a new version. These are L and R class algorithms. They're illegal. They're somewhat regulated algorithms. They mutate on their own. They code on their own. They speak to each other on their own. But they're very interesting, and they're going into augmented algorithms. And they're using these to design some of these behavioral policies that are being used. Now, this sounds all like scary stuff, but it's not really that scary because a lot of the stuff can be used for positive. You will be able to download knowledge in the future. It's not that far off. You can download memories right now, but you can download knowledge in the future. You'll be able to download things in sort of a real time, small bits, a little bit like what Trinity did in Matrix. She didn't download the whole helicopter. She just downloaded the next 10 seconds of how to fly a helicopter. So every 10 seconds, she's just downloading the next 10 seconds. So these types of things are going to start happening. These are some of the conflicts that we're facing ahead, and it's really interesting, especially for startup people. I mean, artificial intelligence will equal human intelligence by 2029. This is Kurzweil. And he's pretty close to this. It's not singularity, but the capacity will equal by 2029, before 2030, before the so-called SDGs will be achieved. You're going to have a comparative model of human and machine intelligence. That's going to change things. But at the same time, by 2030, the World Economic says, human values, the environment will be tested to the breaking point. So at the same time the machines are getting smart enough like humans, human values are starting to break down. There's conflicts all over the place around moral and ethics at the same time. Investments in new innovations, talent could easily leapfrog this. And this is where it comes back to this concept of discipline. We've had a workshop this morning on impact investing, and the concept of impact, the concept of ethics and morality. These are very interesting discussions, but in reality, it will not be regulated because they just will not get ahead of the tech curve to regulate it. Some of the algorithm classes that are being developed now are even hard to understand by their developers. But I won't even go there. But it's a very interesting area when we start to look at it. So this is sort of the last slide. And there is this shift happening in capitalism. If you know Shoshana, Harvard professor, she wrote a lot of books. But there is this shift going. This shift of capitalism is shifting now. So, you know, right from free human, it's really this mutation where you're going to start monetizing personal experiences. You see this right now, right? So we're not going to monetize labor in the future because a lot of it will be automated. We're not going to monetize sort of what you can produce with labor because that's going to be in a different slice of value chain. That's going to go to a very selected few. So when the job losses start to come in, you're going to see the sort of monetization of your personal experiences that are going to move in. Land is pretty well all bought up. There'll be a big push to the ocean. There will be a big migration drive to the coast because most of the economy will be driven by ocean-based economy. So Asia has a lot of coastline. Poor Switzerland is going to have a bit of a problem. So there's a lot of shifting happening down. So when you look at the SDGs in 2030, and I just came from the UN, and believe me, the UN are in a bubble on this one. Reducing poverty, solving a lot of these main challenges and everything else. In actuality, the UN just produced a report about 2 months ago. The SDGs, some of the SDGs are in reverse. It's getting worse. So the point is now, and I think this is the last slide. Yeah, the point is now is what is your role in all this? Because you have a vote, you have a voice, you have an action. As a policymaker, you have an opportunity to look at policy innovation and try to shift things. As an investor, you have an opportunity. Make money, it's pretty easy to make money. You don't have to be that smart to make money. To make a change, you got to think a bit. But there's enough people out there that want to make change that need the money. How many entrepreneurs are looking for funding? How many are you social entrepreneurs, let's say? Are you going to create some impact? Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of great ideas out there. SDG aligned, or however you want to define impact. There's a lot of opportunity. Investors, capitalism has been very nice to the investment community. But millennials coming up, value shifting, a lot more wealth is being owned by women than men, because a lot of the men are dying, but there's a big shift from patriarch to matriarchs and family offices. That means that value systems are going to change. Investors can move into the space. Entrepreneurs, even if you're a 100% commercial operation, try to think products and services. Is there a humanitarian purpose for the products and services? Because what it's going to do, it's not going to shift your market. You're going to have your bread and butter business. It's going to give you additional income streams. It may have a strong impact on your valuation, especially with impact investors. So these are monetary things. So it's simply smarter business to look at maximizing impact as well as a very strong business model, or minimizing negative impact with a very strong business model. It's simply just smarter business right now. And that's it. So I thank you very much, and the boss.